prescription, like that somebody ought to do X, that seems to be like index to an agent. Well, like number one, we just have to clarify that obviously not all normative truths are going to be about moral truth. So like obviously you can have normative truths
Wait,
which
I'm not
might be about
tracking.
like
What are you saying?
yeah, I'm saying that obviously I'm just saying that normative truths aren't always just going
Okay.
to be indicative of moral truths, right? So like you can have normative truths which like indicate non-moral truths. And then like it seems to me like also I mean it seems to me that
Oh,
a lot
that's
of the
not what I
times
was
when we
saying.
do these are wait, what did you say?
I said that's not what I was saying. I was
Yeah,
more
I
saying
didn't
that
say that
like
that's what you were saying. I was just clarifying that like not all normative truths have to be
okay,
indicative of moral truths. And then I was just also gonna say that
yeah, I'm not even sure about
it
that though.
seems a lot of times we do use art, right? And we do prescribe like some kind of obligation. Um, it's not always about an agent, right? So it could be actually about like a state of affairs that's happening. So for example, I can say that that dog ought to be on the mat, or my shoes ought not be on the mat, right? And so it seems that we do and we can meaningfully prescribe arts to situations, even when like the situations don't involve any agents, right? So
Well, I mean,
it does seem
there's
that
a simple
we can
response to
talk
this
about
though.
arts in like terms. Wait, what did you say?
But there's a simple response to this though. Actually, two responses. I mean,
I
you're
mean,
just
yeah,
saying
like you can give the
normativity.
responses, but like since like you made quite a bit of
You're saying that
like points, yeah, earlier. I just want to respond
I don't
first.
believe
Like,
I don't believe I made a lot of points, but I think that's important
well,
what you're
well,
saying though.
yeah, the points are philosophically dense. That's what I mean. So, like, there's going to
I
be a
don't
lot to
even
respond
think
to
that's the
philosophically.
case.
Yeah, I mean, you might not think that's the case, but from my perspective, that's what's going on here. So, like, I just want to make sure that,
That's fine. I just
yeah,
wanted to
I just
unpack what
want
you're
to,
saying about this
yeah.
normativity thing, because it's just, in my opinion, it's just very, very confusing.
Yeah, so
I
I just
mean,
want to
if you're
make
just
sure
saying
that I
that,
do respond to the things that you said, and like after you
what
can
do you feel
obviously
like
give
you
the
haven't
response that you
responded
have.
to?
What did you say?
What do you feel like you haven't responded to?
Like the clarifications about, for example, like what would it mean for somebody or for something to ought to exist? Because you said you were confused on that, and I'm gonna
No,
give the
that's my
explanation for what
prior
it would mean.
contention. That's what we're addressing now.
Yeah, and I'm also gonna talk about like what deontic the thing is and like
No,
why is
yeah,
the
I'm not
case
even
that
curious about that right now. That's
but you did put into question the
not fine.
premise with the first premise, and you also
I
like put into
don't know
question
why
the
I'm
argument
lagging
for premise
so
one.
badly. Wait, what do you say?
You put into question the first premise. You also put into question the argument
Yeah,
for
I know
premise
that.
one. So like,
That's like quite a bit away though. So what we're talking about right now, what you mentioned is that like what's it called that it seems as if we can prescribe oughts to non-agents. I don't even know what that means. Generally like ought just does not apply. Or at least if you're saying that ought doesn't apply to like only what agents ought to do, it can apply to a few things. I
yeah,
mean,
that's what I'm
sure.
saying.
If you're just
Like,
saying that, if you're just saying, wait, hang on. If you're just saying that like, oh, God ought to exist or things like that, I mean, I don't even sign off on that. But there's a few issues there because that's still what's in question. Like ought usually, as you mentioned, implies like some normative force. So like a kind of
yeah,
like prescriptive way about how things should be. But if no one is in the position to do anything about it, then the ought is either like just some disguised value judgment. So like you're just trying to say that it would be better if X were to happen, or it's just some like emotive expression
I
to
mean,
which we can hold off on that because I
I
don't care
think
to get
that
into like
all.
wait, hang on for a second. Something like I
Okay,
wish. But like generally prescriptive oughts, and this is I don't think we disagree on this. Like this is very rudimentary stuff. They're just performatively empty without prescribers or addressees. I mean in ordinary language when we say that something ought to be the case, simply it seems that we're just implying some addressment, some subject. Maybe whether that be a society, whether that be nature. But like if we strip away all agents, I mean the question would obviously just arise then.
yeah, I think he like that. Like, yeah, he's saying quite a lot, and
Sorry, I cut
yeah, he
out.
just like. I
But
mean,
yeah, the
you
question
are
would be
saying
like,
quite a
what
bit.
mechanism
So
or principle or duty would even be there to actualize the prescription? There's just a few like issues that arise.
okay, yeah, okay. So like, just to clarify something what I'm saying, right? I think that all times when we indicate things about art, especially when we're talking about axiarchic value, because this principle is an axiatic principle. All the times when we're
I'm
talking
not even
about
sure what that
axiatic
means.
value and like moral value, I think that it is a value judgment, right? So
Wait,
I
what
think
did you
that a
say?
lot of the
Did you say
cases,
axial?
not
What did you say?
axiatic, like I'm talking about axiology, right? So I think that
Oh, sure.
anytime where we say that X ought to be or some agent ought to do X, I think that that ought there can just be in reference to um it would be better or it would increase the amount of goods in the world if X did that action or if that thing were to occur, right? I think oughts can just be used like just be like a cover for like value judgment. So I don't see any problem with ought just being indicative of value, which actually
I'm
goes
not
back
sure
to
how
what
this
I was saying.
appreciates what I said though.
Uh, I mean, yeah, sure, but like, can you just let me finish one sec? Um, and
Sure.
that just goes back to what I'm saying. So what I'm simply saying is that given that a deontically birthed being has infinite value, so he has infinite axiatic value, it's maximally good, etc., etc. Given all these things,
Well, I just want
then
to
would
be
it not
clear
just
because I
be
don't want to misrepresent you.
yeah,
Well, I don't
okay,
want to misrepresent you
good question.
because it seems as if you just committed or kind of on some weird underhand conceded the fact that you are just or you can just refer to it would be better if. But if you're just doing that, then you're not referring to a claim about duty obligation. You're just expressing a preference value judgment. So I just want to be clear.
Uh,
Are you not doing that?
wait, I just told you that time we're talking about normativity. I think that's what we're going to be talking about, right? Like, in fact, let me just ask you this question, right?
I don't think
Like,
that
if
answered me.
wait, I just told you that normative truths are going to be indicative of that. So I do think I answered your question.
Indicative of what?
Indicative of us saying something like, it would be better if X were to occur than if it weren't to
But
occur.
your original argument was trying to derive a modal conclusion. You're trying to say X possibly exists from ought premises. You're saying that it
Yeah,
would be better if
it
X
possibly
existed,
exists, and
but that
then
doesn't
by
imply that X
proxy,
possibly exists. You'd basically be
you
saying
know,
that,
you,
like
okay.
in some weird example, that it would be better if unicorns are real. So therefore, it implies unicorns possibly exist. But surely that conclusion can be derived other than that it would feel better, or that it seems that it would be better. Like if you're just
No, because
reducing ought to
I'm
better
saying
than you're
that
just
like
reducing
in
its
this,
ability to
yeah,
support your modal or deontic inferences.
I
Like
think
therefore,
I
X
think
must
there's some
possibly
confusion.
exist.
I think there's some confusion about what I'm saying. So I'm not just saying that
Okay.
it would be better. I'm not just saying that it would be better like to some finite degree. Um, I was saying that it would be better to like a maximal or infinite degree. And if it's like better to like a maximal degree, then I think that we would be justified in saying that this thing ought to exist. Like for example, I think you would agree that like if it's maximally better that we have a world where there's like no rape, like there's no like bad things, and like and these are called like deontically perfect worlds. And like if you read anything about
I wouldn't
deontology,
sign
but
off on that.
if you if you agree like it's maximally better like for these worlds to exist where there's no bad things, um, then I think you'd also agree that a world like this ought to exist, correct?
No, I'm saying I don't sign off on that. Like it still seems as if you're trying to say that like this maximal value implies an obligation, but it doesn't. I mean, whether something is a little better or infinitely better, it doesn't change the fact that better just doesn't mean ought. Like to say that better to a maximal degree is some prescriptive claim is false because it's still just an evaluative claim regardless. Like no matter how strong the value claim is, it doesn't generate or manifest some duty or responsibility or necessary truth. So like all I'm saying is that it seems as though better to like a maximal degree. It just seems to express an ideal, but it doesn't really have a normative force to it. Not the normative force
Well,
that ought implies at least. Like better to the max is still compatible with impossibility. We can easily imagine maximally good scenarios that are logical or logically or metaphysically impossible. My bad. So like for example, if I were to say that it would be maximally good if every free creature always freely chose good, or that it could be maximally good if there is some infinite happiness and zero suffering, or like it would be maximally good if there is some omnibenevolent, omnipotent beings in all possible worlds. So yada yada yada. Like all these things, they could be impossible or not impossible, but yet all of them could be ascribed to some evaluative claim. That's what I'm saying. Like it doesn't matter even if you escalate it to it being to you not saying that it could be of a finite degree, but saying that it'd be better to a maximal degree. But it's not really appreciating or acknowledging what my actual refutation is what I'm trying to get.
yeah, I'm just saying that when you do make the value claims, in a lot of these scenarios, these value claims do seem to imply art, right? Because like when you're using the word art, obviously it can be indicative of like an obligation, are a duty, right? But then we have to think about, okay, why does that thing, or why are we prescribing this obligation or duty? The reason why we normally prescribe the obligation or duty is because of some value or is because of some good that we see of prescribing the obligation or duty, right? So we obviously wouldn't prescribe an obligation or duty if we didn't see that any good could come out of this obligation or duty, or if we just saw that if we followed the obligation or duty, all else equal, there would be more bad. Like we just actualize more bad. The rule or like the duty wouldn't help us anywhere. And so all I'm saying
Hmm.
is that
But I'm not
even if you
saying that
take
though.
arts just to be, if you just take arts to be indicative of obligation or duty, there's still a reason why we do like prescribe or ascribe like these obligation or duties. And a lot of the time that could be about value judgment. So I'm simply just saying here is that if we have like if we have like a deontically perfect world, like a maximally good world where like these bads don't exist, I think again you'd say that like a world like this ought to exist. Like it just seems very intuitive to me. Like I don't know about you, but like it seems very intuitive that like we should desire and like we
Yeah.
ought aim to like have a world like this exist.
Well, I don't. Well, again, I don't really like sign off on this. Like again, if you're saying that all oughts are grounded in value, I mean, even in practicality, if this is true, that's not to say that's like universally valid or even addressing what I'm saying. Because obviously, not all value
I
implies
don't know what you
obligation.
mean.
Like if I'm saying, now I'll elaborate on what I mean. So if we could walk through this, it simply seems that I can make the very, very simple example. Like it's good to donate to every charity, but you don't opt to donate to all of them, right? These
That's not tracking what I'm saying.
segregatory.
Because I'm
Wait, hang
talking
on for
about
a
maximal
second. Wait,
goodness.
hang
Like
on for a
I'm talking
second.
about goodness
Hang
instantiated
on
to
for
a
a
maximal
second.
degree.
I'm aware of that, but I'm attacking your claim that all oughts are grounded in value. This is like a preliminary condition. So like obviously supererogatory like acts, such as like above duty good acts, they are valuable, they're not obligatory. So I just want
I
to
mean, I do
clarify,
believe that you ought to
value does
donate
not,
to
hang
charity.
on. So I just want to clarify, that doesn't really mean to what I'm saying. But
Yeah,
maybe like
I think if it's
we'll
good to
clarify
do
that.
something, then you
That
ought to
all
do it.
value does not necessarily entail obligation. That's okay. That has
Wait,
nothing
wait,
to do with what I'm saying.
actually, I don't even see why the claim
I
would. I
clarified
don't
that
see
that's
why the
not what
claim
I'm
would be far
saying.
fetched.
I
I don't see why the
clarified that
claim
that's
would be.
not what I'm saying.
Okay, okay. What are you specifically
So I
saying
don't
then?
know
Because
why
I
you're
believe
like
that if
over
it's good to
talking.
do something, you ought to
I'm
do it.
trying to elaborate, but you're kind of over talking me right
Yeah,
now.
yeah. You can go on then, my
So
bad.
it seems as though not all oughts are grounded in value. Like if I say that like you
Wait, why
ought to
is
keep
that
your
again?
promise, even if I'm oh sorry, I was just about to elaborate before you interrupted me. Is there something you wanted to add more?
No, because like when I was like thinking about the charity example, like
Oh, I thought
if
you
it's
asked me
good
a
to do
question.
something, then I think we ought to do it. Like I think
So
that's
what do
just
you think
true.
my charity example was doing? Like if you could steel man me, what do you think I was even bringing up with that?
I think that you're presenting the charity example to show us, apparently show us that not all like arts are grounding in value judgments. Like not all arts are grounding like the amount of value that following the obligation would bring about.
Yeah, not all oughts are grounded in value.
Yeah, but like okay, so if in the charity example, it seemed like you were saying that even if giving to charity is good, it doesn't mean that we ought to give to charity. I disagree with that claim. I think the claim is pretty
Well, I
intuitive.
mean that's a terrible confusion because that's not what I was saying.
Okay,
But that's
you
quite
can elaborate on what you're saying.
yeah, it's okay. I mean, but that's quite like useless. I think my further like elaboration may clarify further for you before I was interrupted. But it seems as though you can make the example that you ought to keep your promise, even if doing so would result in less good overall. Like deontological theories ground duties in rules, rights, and rationality, not just pure value. I mean, this is also very trivial stuff.
I just told you that
Like, I'm
I'm
not
talking
saying
about
anything like
axiology as
controversial.
well.
When I'm saying that, hang on for a second, because I'm about to land the punchline. I mean, it seems as though you're not actually challenging what I'm saying or my response. If I'm asking, can value ever ground an art? Or sorry. If I'm not asking, can value ever ground an art? Clearly, I'm not requesting such an answer to that, right? I'm just asking, does the value of a being, like for example, God, justify saying that this being ought to exist? Like, if your reply is that all oughts are based in value, that's just not responsive. You're changing, not only are you changing the type of ought in the question, because there are two oughts they're trying to conflate. There's an ontological ought of existence and a moral ought of existence. Um, so that's just two conflations right there. Because just because we prescribe to action oughts based on value doesn't mean that we can prescribe to existent oughts based on value. Not just that, because that's
Why is
kind
that
of
the
the first
case?
blunder. Well, that's just a question, or not a question, but that's just me saying I don't even withhold to that. If you're asking why
Well,
moral
why do
odds
you
and
not hold to it?
ontological odds are like different, because I don't have a reason to. That's also very trivial stuff.
Well, why do you not
But
think you have a reason to?
because I haven't been presented one that I think is good.
Okay, I'll present the reasons. We can
That's
go on.
okay. But real quickly, if I could finish off this thought, it seems as though there's no agent to ground the prescription. Like ought usually also implies someone has a duty. But as I mentioned earlier, which is a contention I'll like recapitulate, if we say, but in God ought to exist, who is actually obligated to actualize such a God? It can't be humans, because we can't create God, and it also can't be God, because he can't exist prior to himself to bring himself about. The sentence God ought to exist, there is no grounding agent. That's why I mentioned earlier that it's just a clear category error. And this is actually a common contention to responses like this used by theists. I mean, even if value often justifies ought to act, it doesn't justify ought to exist without some agent capable of responsibility. Now, I'll go into the you're not or the fact that I'm not denying the possibility of value grounded oughts. I'm just denying this one, but I think you should probably elaborate. You said that like you had good reason for why I should like attribute this to like some moral ought.
Yeah, I'm not. I'm talking about like arts about existence, right? So I'm saying that like if because you said that even if moral arts like grounded in value, it's not the case that like arts about states of affairs grounded in value. I disagree with that.
What?
You said that if even if moral arts are grounded
No,
in
I heard
value,
you. I'm saying that's not what I said.
yeah.
Like that was a confused
You
statement.
said arts about existence, like existential or ontological arts, which are arts about state of affairs, like real state of affairs. Like saying that
Well,
states of
I
affairs
didn't
ought to
say that.
exist, like
In fact, I didn't even define ontological oughts about existence yet. I simply just said that it
you,
seems as if you're conflating two different versions of oughts. It seems that you're using on one end a moral ought about actions, saying something like we help to ought or we ought to help others in some deontic sense, while at the same time also saying that you're attributing some ontological ought about existence to God, saying that God actually ought to exist. And I'm just saying that just because we prescribe action oughts based on value, it doesn't mean necessarily that we have good reason to prescribe existence oughts based on value. I'm just asking you to bridge that gap.
okay, yeah. So firstly, to respond to some of the things that you said, in fact, before we go on to that, because I still didn't understand the charity example, so like, can you just reiterate the charity example again?
Sure. Even though I don't think it's very like fruitful at the moment, but it seems as though you like tried to like relying on this preliminary like principle, actually not even preliminary, one that was added not even initially, but quite recently, where you said that all oughts are grounded in value. And I told you, even if this is true in some weird practicality sense, so I'm not even actually denying it. I'm just saying that this generalization seemingly doesn't connect to what you're saying. Not by like some inherent meaning, just because the fact
Like,
that
I
like
wanted
not
you to
all
repeat
value,
the
or
charity
excuse me,
example.
I was just about to. I was just elaborating on the context. I'll repeat the example if that's all you need though. So it's good to donate to every charity, but that doesn't mean because it's good to donate to every charity that we ought to donate to all of them, right? Because you're referring to a supererogatory act. That's above duty good acts. These are valuable but not obligatory. If you're referring to an obligatory act, then you're not saying that it's good to donate to every charity, which means you're not actually
Oh,
saying that all oughts are grounded in value. Some oughts don't have to be grounded in value for it to still be good in some weird sense, right? So value
well,
does not necessarily entail obligation, at least if you're referring to some deontic sense, right? Like
yeah,
deontological
yeah.
theories generally just ground duties and like rules, rights, rationality, but not just pure value, right? So the reverse isn't true either. Like obligation doesn't always come from value. That just shows the relationship between value and ought. It seems to be like contingent, not logically entailed. At least not if you're working under like a deontological framework. Now,
Okay,
if you
bro.
weren't,
I
which is
think
the
I
assumption that
understand.
I took, then maybe.
Yeah, I think I
Oh yeah, sure,
understand
sure, sure.
now. Yeah, so
So I wasn't
to
saying that
respond to that,
charity.
yeah,
Oh yeah, go ahead.
yeah, to respond to that, I think that the reason in that scenario why we ought not do it is because it would be very difficult, or it might even be impossible for us to do it, right? Like in our
We
current
ought not
states,
do
like it's
what?
just practically in our current states, it's just practically impossible. Like if you get like a
No, I was
random
asking
person on
we
the
ought not
street
do it.
with yeah, okay, I just let me finish. Yeah, like if you get like a practical,
I was
if you get
asking a
like a null
clarifying
person,
question because I didn't hear what
yeah,
you meant.
okay, okay. What was the clarifying question?
You said that Like, for example, the reason we ought not do what? Are you just like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, I'm saying that the reason why we don't have that obligation, right, is because like it would be very difficult for us to do it. Like we might just not be able to do it in our current situation, right? If you think about it, because like if you go up to a normal person in the street and you go up to a normal person and you say, okay, like you should like donate to every charity, like it's just not going to be the case that they're going to be able to do that in their current situation. And so obviously like these deontological rules obviously come with like the assumption that like you can do that thing in your current situation. Just like for example, let's say that I have somebody in a coma, right? And I say that somebody in a coma ought to donate to charity. Well, obviously somebody in a coma like wouldn't be able to donate to charity because in their current
That's not what I'm
situation
saying, though.
they wouldn't be able to do that thing. Like it's just not practical that they do that thing. And given the fact that they can't do it, the obligation there is removed. So it seems like we only say that
Yeah,
the
but that's not what I'm
obligation
saying.
exists. Yeah, I'm not saying that's what you're saying, but I'm saying that the reason
No, I'm saying this
why
isn't
we
like a
ought not do it
contention to
in
what I'm
that
saying.
no, because you said that. Okay, you said that the reason why we ought not do it. Oh no, the reason why we don't have the
I'm
obligation to
lagging a
do it
second.
is because. Wait, what did you say? Okay, you just keep speaking
I
like
was lagging. Wait, what did
under
you
your
say?
breath. Okay, what did you say?
Oh, it's because my mic is lower. I was just asking, what did you say? Like my mic cut out, or not my mic, but my Wi-Fi.
Yeah, so I'm saying that um the reason why I'm specifically clarifying this is just because that I'm just saying that when we prescribe arts or when we say that people ought to do something, that just comes with the assumption that they can't do that thing. And obviously, if they can't do it, then we wouldn't prescribe this
Look,
art. Like
even
the
if
art wouldn't have
visibility
any meaning.
matters, that doesn't collapse the distinction.
Yeah,
Like
what
that's
did you
what I'm
say?
trying to say. Like this isn't like an actual response.
Nobody said
Like
the
all
collapse
you're
is
just
the
adding is
distinction.
like
I'm
a filter
responding
of
to something you
feasibility.
said earlier in your argument.
Well, no, it seems as though you're responding to the charity example. You're saying that the reason why we don't say someone ought to donate to every charity isn't because it's not good, but because in some situations it could be very, very hard or impossible. And deontological rules assume this practicality, so it's not an actual objection. But I'm saying this isn't even
Yeah.
what I'm saying, nor is that even like an accurate thing. I don't know
No,
why the
because
fuck
I'm
I'm
saying that the reason.
lagging.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. There we
Okay,
go.
maybe I.
But
Okay,
yeah, I was saying
like
this. Well,
okay.
hang
Why
on.
why do you
I
think
just
in
want
this
to clarify.
situation that we don't have the obligation? Because because
Again,
according
that's
to you,
not
we
what
don't
I'm
have the
claiming.
obligation because of the.
That's not what I'm
Wait,
claiming. So, as I
wait.
mentioned before,
I didn't
I said
say. I
this
didn't
wasn't a
say.
response because, well, you asked why, so that implies that you're saying that's what I'm saying, or at
No, I
least in
said
some
why do
implicit
you not
sense
think we
committing
have this
to.
obligation to donate to every charity?
Again, I'm trying to like clarify and respond.
Yeah.
If
Okay.
I could just finish my thought. So it
Yeah.
seems
Okay. You
as
can go
though
on.
you're not actually responding in such a weird sense because you're just adding feasibility. You're saying that this proves that good is not equivalent to ought in such a weird way. Or sorry,
Mhm.
opposite. But I'm just saying this. If we only prescribe ought when something is both good and reasonably doable, then goodness alone still doesn't even determine an obligation. The fact that we need to check more than just value shows that value is insufficient for obligation. Like there are still good actions that are feasible and not obligatory. Right? It's perfectly feasible for me to spend my Saturday picking up trash like in a park. It would clearly make the world better. But we would still say that would be nice, but you don't have to, right? You can still have feasible goodness without an obligation. Like deontological like frameworks and
Yeah.
rules,
Yeah.
it
But here we're trying
distinguishes
to
duty
instantiate a
from
maximum amount of
segregation.
good.
What are you talking about? I already clarified why that
I'm
doesn't
saying
matter.
that. Yeah. I'm saying that. Yeah. I'm saying that in this scenario, we're not just
Yikes.
trying to say that look, the action has value, therefore you ought to do it. And we're saying that given the fact that this state of affairs have an infinite amount of value, um, that it must be instantiated. That this state of affairs must be instantiated, and the state of affairs that must be
Wait, you
instantiated
said given
is
the state of affairs
existence of
have
God.
what?
I said that given the existence of the state of affairs would have an infinite amount of value. So I'm saying that when the state of affairs has an infinite amount of value, that seems like to amount to like an art. It seems to amount to some normative fact, like something that ought to exist.
I've
Because
already
again,
addressed this though.
I'm talking about axiarchic value. So I'm not just talking about moral value. I'm not just talking about moral goodness. I'm talking about axiarchic value. Like given the principles of given the axiarchic principle, it would just follow.
Okay, I'm not gonna lie. Like, I don't want to. I'm not trying to claim you're gibberating, but like this just doesn't respond. Okay, so value still is not equivalent to ought even at infinity. Like you're trying to suggest some like weird threshold theory. Like saying that like once a state of affairs becomes infinitely good, it crosses a line or becomes obligatory. But that's not even a logically like valid inference. Like no matter how valuable a state of affairs is, infinite or infinite, it doesn't logically entail that someone has an obligation to bring it about. Like to say ought, we still need an agent who can act a duty which binds that
I'm not
agent and an
talking about
action that leads
moral
to that
arts.
good.
I'm talking
If you're just
about
talking about a
arts about state of
metaphysical,
affairs.
I'm
I'm
aware,
not
I'm
saying that
aware.
somebody ought bring it about. I'm saying that it ought exist. I'm not saying that somebody ought bring it about. I'm just saying that it ought exist. Like nobody has to bring it
Okay,
about.
so
Obviously,
let me write this down so we're not mistracking.
like obviously arts about state of affairs. Like arts about state of affairs that be instantiated are different
I
than
just cut
arts
out.
about moral
You can
arts.
tell.
Yeah.
So I asked, let's just write this down because clearly, if you think I'm not tracking, you said that I'm not talking about moral states of affairs. What affairs are you talking about?
So I told you that I'm talking about state of affairs that don't need to be
I cut
bring
out again.
about by any human or by any agent. So obviously, no human is going to be able to bring about this state of affairs, but it still ought to exist in the first place. And when I say ought, there, I'm referring to axial.
Oh
I'm
my
referring
goodness,
to
that's not responding.
ax. I'm talking about axiological value.
Okay, okay, I understand that. I understand that. But I'm just saying that's not responding because that was already an assumption. You're just making a what you call agentive, like non-moral claim. Like something so supremely good, such as God, such overwhelming value that its existence ought to obtain, even if no one's responsible for this. Like this is very rudimentary stuff. I was never confused on this. I'm just saying that, like you're still using ought in a disguised normative way. Like it isn't like this doesn't like reconcile any gap. Like if you're not invoking any moral agents, your use of ought is still normative language regardless. Like you're saying, given its value, the state of affairs should be the case. But once you strip away agency, any kind of prescription or moral framework, we're just unclear and it's just ambiguous what ought even means anymore. What's left? Who's doing the oughting? Why does the value translate into a demand for reality? Like without someone to act or a rule to be followed, ought to exist just becomes a categorical mistake, my bad, blunder. But yeah, applying normative force to metaphysical facts is just it's quite nonsensical. Like assuming the fact that there's no agent or a rule or whatever. Like at this point, it just seems more accurate to say it would be fitting if it exists, or its existence would be great, as I mentioned previously, right? Because you're no longer making actual modal claims; you're just making evaluative claims. Like evaluative like significance does not imply modal necessity. Like you're making more of like a figure to say that this state of affairs has supreme value, therefore this state of affairs exists or must exist. But there's clearly a gap between one and two. Value, you still haven't even instantiated why value, what's it called, determines this actuality. As I've actually brought up before, about 3 times now. Like we can imagine states of affairs that are incredibly valuable, logical, coherent, and just yet not actual. Like a universe where every conscious being is forever perfectly fulfilled in joy and wisdom. This seems infinitely good, to most people at least. Yet it doesn't follow that it must exist. It's possibly unrealized, right? So clearly value doesn't entail existence, even if it's at an infinite value. That's why when you keep bringing it up, it just seems like a nonsensical, it just really seems like gibberish. Because if you want to step from the value to actuality, you need to add some kind of additional principle. Like, and maybe you're trying to establish that with like the ontological argument, but you have to argue that. That's not like something that's assumed, which is what I'm trying to say. Like, even